So I'm Trey Pendragon. I'm a developer at Princeton and the technical lead for Valkyrie. I'm a white guy in his 30s. I've got blonde hair and a beard, and even more than normal. I could really use a haircut. So today I'm going to try to give you an update on Valkyrie, but I'm sort of assuming that there are three audiences here. There are those of you who have never heard of Valkyrie, or maybe you're confused about what it is. I'll clarify some of that. There are people who know exactly what it is, but they don't really know why we would ever do such a thing. I'm going to spend a lot of time describing why that's the case. And then there are the people who have seen this presentation more than once, and you're about to check your email. And I promise there's new stuff. I mean, check your email, I guess, but it's all new slides, 2020 edition, which might be a bad thing to say, but I guess we'll find out. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to talk about what Valkyrie is, talk about why Valkyrie is a thing. I'm going to talk about what happened this year. Spoiler alert, it's like one slide. And then we're going to talk about what we're doing next and how you can help. So what is Valkyrie? Valkyrie is a Norse myth. Maybe you've heard of it. There's some great stories. They've got wings and cool helmets oftentimes. There's really good art that I probably should have put on this slide, but I didn't. It's also a cool word I picked for a library in an airport one day. At the time, it was a Rails application. Today, it's a lovely library that I'll go on to describe. And it's also a data mapper ORM with adapters and practices suited to digital repositories. I realize that's probably the least useful sentence for describing what this is. So we're going to try that one more time. Valkyrie replaces Active Fedora. Active Fedora is the way we save data to our database, Fedora, similar to Active Record. It takes our metadata and it puts it in a place. The big difference between Valkyrie and Active Fedora is that it splits representation of the object and persistence and queries from one another. So instead of having one thing that can save itself, I have one object. All it does is describe itself. It has things like title, author, publisher, etc. And I pass that over to a persister or a query service to go get that thing, or to save that thing, or to delete it, or do a whole variety of stuff. What this means for you is you're not going to be able to do resource.save, which would bind it to one place, or resource.findby, or resource.where.accept that includes that destroy. None of that. Can't do any of those things. There are different ways to handle the same sort of use cases. And importantly, probably the reason why you might be interested is Valkyrie lets you use Fedora, Solr, Postgres, disk storage, cloud storage, or write your own adapter for your use cases really fast, but have all the same APIs so you can hang out with your friends and figure out features that we can do for our patrons. So you might say, Trey, what does this actually mean for me? How's this going to change my code? This is a very old table. I know I said that I had all new slides and it was a lie. In this one, you can see a comparison between what we'll do in Active Fedora and what it looks like in Valkyrie. For instance, if I want to find a record, it's book.find in Active Fedora and Active Record. In Valkyrie, I instead call the query service for a specific adapter and pass it the ID, and it'll give it back. Book.save will save a thing, versus Valkyrie, which is take my book. Here you go, adapter. Please save me. Same thing for delete. In order to save to Fedora and Solr, you have no choice in Active Fedora. You're going to save to both of them. In Valkyrie, you can mix and match various backends and have them all respond to the same API, which means you can transparently save to multiple places via some sort of combined adapter, and all your code will look the same. If you want to save only to Fedora and Active Fedora, you can't do it. Or you could maybe, but it would be really hard and it wouldn't look great. In Valkyrie, you just pass it to the adapter. If you wanted to save to Postgres in Active Fedora, well, you're probably talking about a new application. or not using the library at all, I guess. In Valkyrie, you just pass it to the Postgres adapter. It looks all the same. If you want to migrate, happens a lot in Active Fedora in my experience. For instance, if you want to change DC contributor to DCE contributor, the modeling of what that property is built into the resource and how you save it. So pulling it out and putting it back is really difficult. I may or may not be scarred by this particular experience. But at Valkyrie, all of that definition sits inside the adapter. So you just pull it out one way, and then you put it into a new adapter and it saves it the new way. And you don't have to worry about, how do I run 2 different versions of this thing at the same time? Architecturally, this is what it looks like. There are 2 big pieces in Valkyrie. There are metadata adapters. This is where I save things that have like title and publisher and et cetera, et cetera. There are a bunch of queries inside a query service that are named queries, so that when the Fedora developers come and ask us and they say, hey, what queries do you actually use to make your repository work? We can say, oh, these ones, instead of literally all of them. And at the same time, it provides us a nice way to be like, oh, well, these ones were hard to implement, so maybe there's some mismatch between our use cases, and maybe there's some feature we have to add to that backend. Persisters handle saving, and they all give back a resource. Change sets, I am not going to go super far into. If you'd like to talk about them, we can talk about them in a channel or in Q&A or something like that, but resources don't have validations, and change sets give you a way to give them validations as well as handle things like forms. Storage adapters are, I want to save to the cloud, like binary content, or I want to save to Fedora, or I want to save to disk. They output files. This is a very similar system to something like Shrine or Active Storage. You'll notice there's no link between storage adapters and metadata adapters. Files just happen to have IDs. So you can say, associate a file with a resource through the metadata. And that's on purpose. You could totally replace all of that storage adapter business with some other library if that's what you wanted to do. But we do have storage adapters for Fedora, so that does help. But I think the really important part of this particular presentation is, why would you ever want to do this? There are other libraries out there. There are bigger communities out there. We could just use one of those various libraries, couldn't we? And I think the reasoning behind that is 3 things. We can't make up our minds. Code's hard and friends are good. What I mean by that, we can't make up our minds is, in 2016, when I worked on Valkyrie, these are the various things, or when I first started Valkyrie with the community, these are the various things I heard. Fedora is slow, Fedora is great, Fedora 3 was better, Elasticsearch is better, Postgres is great, Postgres is awful. Storing things is hard, background workers keep timing out need transaction. Triple stores are great. Oh, they don't support our triple store anymore. Solar is great, Rethink DB is cool. Oh, that company's gone. Why can't my authors be sorted? What about NoSQL? Migrations are hard. And most importantly, I think, is how can we use my tools, the ones that I've decided are right? And that last point is actually, the one that I really struggled with at first. Why can't we all together pick the right tool? And of course, in my head at the time, it was, why can't we pick my tool? But in speaking to my colleagues and my friends and all of the great minds here in Samvera, I realized, what if they're all the right tool? Technology, institutions, opinions are complex. We're all working in a set of different circumstances and different restrictions and with different use cases. Everyone's doing the best that they can. So Valkyrie aims to make that allow you to make that decision, test it, and share your results as quickly as possible. So that's principle number 1 of Valkyrie. Make it easy to support your tech. Sorry, okay. The other thing is, code's hard. Active Fedora works. Very few people know how it works, and even fewer of those are still working on it. This isn't the fault of anybody. Active Fedora is a complicated library. There are lots of features that it needs to support. And It's just sort of how it happened. We use very few external dependencies for that whole stack, and the maintenance burden is all on us. And our profession has some unique use cases that we can't just pull from another library. I promise I'll get back to that, but not right now, because I assume some people are like, are you sure? So if code's hard, then one of our principles should be do less code so that less code is hard. So that's principle 2, use the smallest amount of code possible to meet the requirements. Valkyrie's about 5,300 lines of code. Active Fedora's 9,000 is not a fair comparison. They do totally different sets of things. Active Fedora is a bunch of query stuff, and it's really smart about saving some things. Valkyrie stores to like 6 places. Like they're not the same libraries, but on the metric of there's just less stuff, it does help. Principle number 3, if we're gonna write less code, then we still have the same use cases. Let's let other people write our code for us. So use external dependencies with communities whenever possible. Let's build in larger portions of communities so that we don't have to maintain that software and we can trust it. So Valkyrie's core is handled by a bunch of their like dry types and dry schema and dry core libraries. Reform handles change sets. Active record handles saving in Postgres. RSolar handles saving to Solar, and files supports like disk storage and things like that. Those cases where there aren't external libraries that we can use really are the biggest portions of the code base. So 1,300 lines of code are just the Fedora adapter. Just because there aren't external dependencies to use there. So we have to take on that burden. We used to use Active Fedora to try to lower this, but it seemed pretty silly to propose replacing Active Fedora with a library that depended on it. So you might ask me, what about Hanami or Ruby Object Mapper or various other data mapper things? I will say I tried, and several of us have tried very hard. Either writing an adapter for those was too hard, they made too many assumptions about what we were doing, or they didn't support an important use case. Some of these are really good at relational database management systems and not necessarily things like triple stores and Postgres. Other ones, it would be hard to fit some of these use cases. So if I say that, what are the use cases that make us special? There are a lot of them, but these are a few that I think of immediately. Our data is really complicated. It's hierarchical. We're always changing and always moving data around. Several of our partners want a field to have 2 types of data. This is especially problematic for relational databases. So an author might have 2 values. I might have a URI that's an author. And I also have the string Trey Pendragon. It's unlikely. I've never authored anything. And there's also RDF concerns. I have to be able to say that a string is in a particular language, and various other use cases that are not really library specific, but more common in our profession, certainly. We also often change our minds about which fields go where, how data should be represented or output. So it's really important for our data to be flexible. And number 4 was sort of a late point. Was the order of our metadata turns out to be really important, but only sometimes, and often we find out it's important later. So we have to make sure we can apply order and make assertions about it no matter what system we're in. So if this is true, then how do I prove that we support the use cases? And this is principle number 4. All of the adapters that are built into the system, as well as any external adapters, have to be able to be verified via a suite of shared tests. So Valkyrie provides a bunch of RSpec tests that you can run on your adapter or even in your application just to verify that the use cases that people have brought forward as necessary for our software work for that adapter. It does a bunch of things like testing RDF and testing ordered properties and testing that all the various queries work. All of that you can be sure and confident when you apply an adapter that passes those tests that they're going to meet those use cases. So those are the principles. I personally look to these when I'm working on Valkyrie, but I really should add it to our documentation. And they're also open for discussion. So the last point I said was important was having friends. The hope with Valkyrie is that if each of us can make our own decision about where we store things, but we can still have the same code and the same APIs, and we can work together on shared solutions still. There was some concern when Valkyrie started that it would create this rift in the community, that suddenly people would not all be storing to the same place, so that would be a problem. But I think the reality of the situation is, in the past, we all had these same concerns about where we were storing things. People were going to implement those no matter what. And now at least we can provide shared solutions on top of no matter what backend you're pushing to. And we can have a more stable base for everybody. So that's why. Here's the state of Valkyrie. Software is stable. Last release was on March 12th, version 2.1.1. There are multiple applications that are running Valkyrie in production. Nobody's asked for any big features recently. There are a couple of things that we need to work on that I'll get to in just a second. There are 2 stable production systems representing millions of objects and hundreds of terabytes of data. There is Figgy, which is the repository at Princeton, and there is also the Duke repository. Work is being done to put Hierarch, or to put Valkyrie into Hierarch so that you can enjoy all of this lovely work. They are headed towards full integration. It is a requirement of the product already. If you want to help make this happen, please talk to them. I wanted to give special thanks, like I do in all of these slides, to all of our contributors, as well as the administrations of their institutions that have allowed them to work on this product with me. So what happened this year? I promised this would be quick. So we added support for Fedora 6. We didn't do anything. They have the same API that they had before that we depend on. Thank you to Esme for testing. We released some model constraints with some queries, and Duke released a repository. And that's it. It's been a long year, as I'm sure you can guess. What's next? Here's a roadmap. The slides are available for here, so you can click this. We're going to work on some Solr indexing stuff. We're going to get rid of Draper. We're going to add hashes in a sustainable way, and we're going to add some more documentation. This is pretty close to what the 2020 roadmap is. I'm basically renaming it to the 2021 roadmap. Hopefully next year goes better. How you can help? We do need a new product owner. Kate Lynch, thank you for acting as product owner so far. She has moved on to my institution, and we feel like it's important that we have viewpoints from multiple places in order to better represent the software. If you're implementing this and you want to be a larger part, get a hold of me. Keep your eyes out for Community Sprint next year. And if you want to get a hold of us, we are in the Valkyrie channel on Slack. Thanks, everybody.